I remember that Halloween by the sound of leaves whispering across the pavement, like the world was trying to warn me before it happened. My son Mason was 5. He had vampire fangs from the dollar store, plastic and too big for his mouth, so every few steps he had to push them back in with a sticky little finger covered in chocolate. He'd been counting down for weeks. It was supposed to be a night for normal things. Pumpkins, laughter, pretending life wasn't falling apart. I had $23 left in my account, rent due in 2 days, and a boss who stopped returning my calls after I refused his favor. But Mason didn't know any of that. He just knew Halloween was magic, and I was determined to let him believe it for 1 more year. "Mommy, this one has lights shaped like ghosts," he said, tugging my hand as we reached a row of decorated houses. I smiled like I wasn't breaking. "Then let's see if the ghosts have Kit Kats." For a while it worked. He ran from house to house, tripping over his little cape, shouting "trick or treat," like the world wasn't made of debts and threats. Parents chatted on lawns, porch lights flickered, and everything glowed orange and safe. Until we reached the end of Maple Street. Every other house had carved pumpkins, fog machines, or glowing skeletons. But the mansion at the corner, the black iron gates, the stone lions, the silence, it didn't belong. No decorations, no light, just darkness swallowing the windows whole. "Mommy," Mason whispered, tugging again. "That house looks like a vampire's castle." I almost laughed. "That's one way to put it. But it's not on our list, baby. Let's go to the next one." He frowned. "But what if they have the good candy? The gold ones?" I should have said no again. I did say no again, but Mason had my eyes, and my weakness was always him. I blinked once, and he was already running toward the gate. "Mason," I hissed, my heartbeat tripping into panic. "Get back here!" He didn't even look over his shoulder. The small iron gate wasn't locked. He slipped through, his vampire cape flapping, his candy bucket swinging in one hand. By the time I caught up, he was already climbing the stone steps toward the double doors. My chest hurt from the run and from fear I didn't understand. "Baby, please!" But he was already knocking. 3 small, confident taps. The sound echoed through the quiet like a dare. I was about to grab him and run when the door opened. At first I thought no one was there. Then I saw him. He filled the doorway like a shadow come to life. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black dress shirt with the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled to reveal the veins on his forearms. He wasn't dressed for Halloween. He wasn't dressed for anyone. He looked down at Mason first, and for a second his expression softened. "What are you supposed to be, kid?" Mason puffed out his chest. "A vampire, but a nice one." The man's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "A nice vampire, huh? Rare breed." Then his eyes lifted to mine. Dark, steady, and sharp enough to cut through whatever cheap courage I had left. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. "Who are you supposed to be?" My throat went dry. "Just his mom. We were leaving." He stepped forward slightly, into the light spilling from the foyer. I caught the scent of something faint and expensive, smoke and cedar. "You knocked," he said. "You might as well take something." Before I could respond, he crouched to Mason's level, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a gold-wrapped chocolate bar. Not a brand I recognized. Not something you buy at Walmart. Mason's eyes went wide. "Say thank you," I whispered, because my instincts were screaming that we should leave. "Thank you," Mason said, already unwrapping it. The man straightened, his gaze lingering on me. "You don't need to knock on any more doors tonight." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. I froze, unsure whether to thank him or run. "Excuse me?" He studied me for a long moment as if he were trying to place me. His tone softened, but his words didn't. "It's not safe out there. Roads get darker, people get careless." "I can handle the dark," I said, trying to sound braver than I was. He tilted his head slightly. "You sure about that?" Something in his voice hit deeper than it should have. It wasn't flirtation. It was recognition. Mason broke the tension. "Mommy, can we see the inside?" "It's like a castle." I shook my head quickly. "No, we're going home." But the man, God help me, smiled at Mason. A real smile this time. "Maybe next time, kid." Then to me, "You should get him home. But if you ever need a safer street to walk, come back here." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I didn't. His eyes said enough. We left fast. I didn't breathe until we were halfway down the block, until the house was a shape behind us again. Mason munched on his candy, oblivious. "He was nice, Mommy. He didn't even scare me." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, not everyone wears a mask to be scary." I thought that was the end of it. Just one strange encounter on a cold night. But when I tucked Mason into bed later, I noticed something inside his pumpkin bucket, a small black envelope with no name. My heart hammered as I opened it. Inside was a single card, Luca Moretti, and beneath the name, an address, the same house, and a number. I'd heard that name before. Everyone in town had. Luca Moretti, the man who ran half the city from the shadows, the man whose enemies disappeared quietly, and my son had just knocked on his door. I wanted to burn the card. I wanted to forget it existed. But part of me, the part that remembered his eyes, couldn't. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me flinch. At one point I thought I heard footsteps outside. By morning I told myself I'd imagined it. Just nerves. But then, when I went to take out the trash, there was a package on my doorstep. No return label. Inside, a single chocolate bar, gold-wrapped. The same kind he'd given Mason. And a note. "Told you, you won't need to knock anywhere else." That was when I realized this wasn't over. Whatever had started at that door wasn't done with me yet. And for reasons I still can't explain, a small, secret part of me didn't want it to be. The next week blurred together like one long October night that never quite ended. The candy from that evening sat untouched in a bowl by the sink. But the gold-wrapped bar, Luca's, was gone. Mason had eaten it before I could even think about hiding it. I told myself that was fine. People like him didn't notice missing chocolate, except he did. 2 days later, I was walking Mason home from preschool when a black car pulled up beside the sidewalk. The window slid down, and there he was, Luca, the man from the door. Dressed the same, black shirt, open collar, sleeves rolled up, no tie, no expression. Just that impossible calm. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at Mason, then at me. "Your tire's flat," he said finally. "Back left," I blinked. "What?" He nodded toward my beat-up sedan parked half a block away. "You shouldn't drive like that. Bad neighborhood. Things happen." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Which somehow made it worse. I forced a polite smile. "Thanks for the advice, but we'll manage." He tilted his head. "You always say that." I froze. "Excuse me?" He smiled faintly, like he'd just caught me bluffing at a game I didn't know I was playing. "Get in the car. I'll drop you off. I'm not safe," he interrupted. "No, you're not. So stop pretending." Mason was watching us, his small hand tightening around mine. He looked scared but curious too. Luca must have noticed because his voice softened. "Hey, little vampire," he said, leaning slightly out the window. "You want to ride in a car that goes faster than a broomstick?" Mason grinned. "You have a broomstick?" Luca laughed, low, almost surprised. "Something like that." Then to me, 5 minutes, I promise. And that's how we ended up in the back seat of his car. Mason chattering about Halloween while I tried to keep my pulse under control. The city rolled by in flashes of gray and gold, and Luca's reflection in the window looked too calm for the storm he carried around him. When the car stopped, it wasn't at our building. It was at his, the mansion from Halloween night. I said drop off. I snapped, clutching Mason closer. He didn't flinch, and I said safe. "You think that building you live in counts as that?" He wasn't wrong. My landlord was half a criminal. The hallway smelled like bleach and regret. And the guy across from us dealt something stronger than coffee. But that didn't mean I wanted his kind of safety. "I'm not one of your people," I said quietly. He looked straight at me. "That's why you and your boy are still alive." The words didn't make sense until later. But right then I was too tired to fight him. He opened the door, waited for us to move, and somehow, God knows how, Mason ran ahead into the courtyard like he belonged there. Luca's house looked different in daylight. Less haunted, more human. There were carved pumpkins lined along the path now. Subtle, elegant, like someone had tried to make the place less intimidating. "Did you decorate?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Had someone do it," he said, walking past me. Figured the kid deserved the full Halloween. I didn't reply. I just followed my son inside, through doors too tall, and a silence too deep. That was the start of something I didn't understand until much later. The next few days, Luca insisted we stay just until it's safe. He said someone had been asking around about me, someone I used to work for. I didn't ask how he knew. I just nodded and told myself it was temporary. But temporary turned into days, and days turned into nights. Nights where I'd put Mason to bed in a guest room that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale, then find myself downstairs, staring out at the city from Luca's balcony. He always found me there. Always. Like he could sense when the silence started to drown me. "You ever stop running?" he asked one night, leaning on the railing beside me. I didn't look at him. "When you stop chasing," he laughed softly. Touché. The wind caught his shirt, the fabric shifting across his chest. He didn't look real in that light. He looked like someone I'd imagined before I knew what danger really was. He turned serious. "You shouldn't be scared of me." "I'm not," I lied. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath. "Then why do you shake every time I look at you?" "I'm cold," I said. Liar. He said it like he was amused, but there was something else behind it, something that made my heart stumble. We stood there in silence, just the two of us in the city below. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "That man from your old job, the one who wouldn't stop calling. You didn't tell me what he did." I looked away. "He didn't do anything." His voice hardened. "He tried." I turned to him then, eyes wide. "How do you know that?" He met my gaze without flinching. "Because I made sure he won't try again." I stepped back, the air leaving my lungs. What did you do?" He didn't answer right away. Then, calmly, "You don't need to worry about him anymore." For a long time, I just stared at him. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to scream that he had no right. But all I could think about was Mason, sleeping upstairs, safe, finally safe, and that terrified me more than anything he'd said. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do that for us?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because you knocked on my door." It was the simplest, strangest answer I'd ever heard. That night, I dreamed of him. Not the man he was, but the one I wanted him to be. The one who looked at my son like he saw something pure for the first time in years. Days later, I woke to find Mason gone from his bed. Panic hit me like a blade. I ran through the halls barefoot, calling his name, until I heard laughter coming from the courtyard. He was outside with Luca. Luca was kneeling beside a half-carved pumpkin, showing Mason how to hold the knife safely. Mason giggled every time the blade slipped. There were 3 pumpkins lined up already, 2 smiling, 1 frowning. When he saw me, Luca stood. He wanted to carve them before the holiday's over. I could barely breathe. "You scared me," his expression softened. "You scare easy." I wanted to hate him for how calm he was. But watching Mason beam up at him like he'd found a hero, it broke something inside me. Later, after Mason went inside to wash up, I found myself saying what I shouldn't. "You shouldn't let him get attached." "Too late," he said, not looking away from the pumpkins. Then he added almost to himself, "So should you." That was the moment everything shifted. I saw him, not the legend, not the danger, but the man beneath it. The one who lived alone in a house full of ghosts, pretending he didn't need to be saved. That night, when he kissed me, it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable, but the illusion shattered fast. The next morning, I went to get coffee and found his study door open. Inside, on his desk, was a photograph. Me, younger, standing beside a man I barely remembered. The man who'd hurt me years ago, the one I'd thought I'd escaped. And behind him in that same photo stood Luca. I picked it up, hands shaking. My name was written on the back in careful handwriting. He'd known me long before Halloween. Long before I ever knocked on his door. When I turned around, he was standing in the doorway. "You were never a stranger, were you?" I said quietly. He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I didn't want to know. I left his house before dawn. Mason was still asleep, curled up with that ridiculous stuffed bat Luca had given him. I wanted to wake him, but I couldn't look at his face without feeling sick, guilt mixed with something that wasn't supposed to feel like love. So I wrote a note. Mommy needs to get breakfast. Stay with Luca. Be brave. I walked out barefoot, the marble cold under my feet, the air outside colder still. By the time I reached the gates, my breath looked like smoke and my thoughts like static. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The streets were empty, except for the early fog and the smell of burned pumpkin candles from last night's Halloween decorations. Every step echoed like a countdown. He'd known me. Before the candy, before the door, before Mason's laughter filled that lonely house, he'd known me. And worse, he'd known the man in that photograph. When I finally stopped running, I found myself outside an old diner on the edge of town. I hadn't been there in years. The same cracked sign, the same smell of coffee that's been brewing too long. The waitress recognized me but didn't ask questions. I must have looked like a ghost that wasn't worth haunting. I sat there for hours, watching the steam rise from my cup, thinking about Luca, thinking about the way he watched over Mason, the way he carved pumpkins just to make a child laugh, the way his voice softened when he said my name, and the way he lied. I told myself it didn't matter, that we were free now. But when I called the preschool to say Mason wouldn't be in that week, the woman on the phone hesitated. "Ma'am, he hasn't been in since last Tuesday." I dropped the phone. My blood went cold. He hadn't let me leave. He'd let me run. He'd kept my son. I was back on the street before my brain caught up. I didn't even remember getting in a cab. I just knew I had to get back to that house. By the time I reached it, the sky was bruised purple with sunset. The gates were open. No guards, no sound. The mansion looked like it was holding its breath. Inside, I found him in the same study where I'd found the photograph. He was standing by the fireplace, sleeves rolled up, the glow from the flames cutting hard lines across his face. My son sat on the rug, playing with toy cars like the world hadn't just ended. I ran to Mason first. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking as I checked him. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Luca's voice was quiet. "He's fine. He's been fine." I spun toward him. "You had no right to keep him here." He didn't argue. He just said, "You were never supposed to leave like that." "Like what? Like someone escaping?" He flinched at the word. "Like someone running from the wrong man." I almost laughed. "You are the wrong man." He moved closer, slow enough for me to notice the bruises along his jaw. "Faint, but there. That man in the photo, the one beside you, he's not a ghost. He's alive, and he's been looking for you." The room tilted. My throat closed. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He reached into his pocket and threw a folded newspaper onto the table. A headline stared up at me. "Local businessman's wife and child. Missing for 5 years. Police reopen case." The photo beneath it was grainy but unmistakable. Me, holding Mason as a baby. The man beside us smiling like the devil dressed for church. My heart dropped somewhere between the floorboards. "He's still looking?" "He found out you were here," Luca said. "He sent people. That's why I kept you in this house. Why I didn't let you leave. Don't pretend this is protection. You've been watching me for years. I watched because he told me to," he said sharply. At first, the air in my lungs turned to stone. He kept talking, quieter now. "I was his collector. I found people. Debtors, enemies, wives who ran. When he told me to find you, I thought you were like the others. I didn't ask questions." He looked down, voice breaking just slightly. "Until I saw you. Until I saw the bruises on your neck that were still healing when you smiled at your son." He lifted his eyes to mine. "I never told him where you went. I cut contact. I walked away from everything because I couldn't hand you back to him." I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to. But hate is simple, and nothing about this was simple anymore. Mason tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, why are you crying?" I pulled him close, kissing his hair. "Because we're leaving, baby." Luca didn't stop me this time. He just stood there, watching, silent. But when I reached the door, he said, "You can leave, but he'll find you. And when he does, I won't be there to stop him." I turned back. "Then you stop him now." He met my eyes. "That's what I've been doing." The next few days vanished in chaos. We hid in a friend's basement across town. Every noise made me jump. Every knock felt like the end. On the third night, I woke to sirens in the distance. Then silence. Then a phone call. A stranger's voice. "Ma'am, we have a man here. He asked for you before he passed." I didn't breathe until they said his name. Luca. They found him in an alley near the docks. Gunshot wounds, 2 of them. They said he was protecting someone else. The report didn't say who, but I already knew. The man who used to own me was dead too. 2 bodies. 2 ghosts. 1 message, it was over. I didn't cry until Mason asked, "Is the candy man coming back?" I said no. Then I cried for hours. Months passed. Winter came. The snow made everything quiet again. I got a new job at a bakery, small but enough to keep us fed. Mason started school. He told kids stories about the man in black who scared away monsters. None of them believed him, and that was fine. Life went on. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. One evening in March, I came home to find a small black envelope on my porch. My stomach dropped. For a long minute, I couldn't touch it. When I finally did, my hands trembled. Inside was a single piece of gold-wrapped chocolate. No note, no name. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet, the way I used to listen to his footsteps in the hall. Then I smiled, small, bitter, real. "He kept his promise," I whispered. That night, after I tucked Mason into bed, I sat by the window, thinking about him. The man I'd met on Halloween, the one who said I wouldn't need to knock anywhere else. He'd been right, because sometimes love doesn't save you. It hides you. It burns down the world around you so you can walk away from the ashes. But sometimes, rarely, it rebuilds what the fire leaves behind. Mason still asks for Halloween stories before bed. He wants the same one every time. "Tell me about the night we knocked on the wrong door." I always tell him the same version. That we found kindness in a place everyone said was cursed. That a man in black gave him candy and saved our lives. That monsters wear different faces, but so do angels. When he finally falls asleep, I sit there in the dark, watching the streetlights flicker through the window, and I wonder if somewhere out there, someone else is knocking on a door they shouldn't. And if the man behind it will open it with the same look in his eyes, half danger, half salvation. The truth is, I don't know what happens after the story ends. Maybe that's the point. Some loves aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be survived. But every Halloween since, when the air smells like smoke and sugar, I still leave 1 candy bar on the porch, gold-wrapped, untouched, just in case he ever comes back. If you're still here, listening to my story, maybe you understand what it's like to lose yourself and somehow find love in the wreckage. Halloween started as a night of masks, but it ended with every truth exposed. And somehow, that saved us. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to follow the channel for more whispered confessions like mine. New stories every week. Stories about love, danger, and the kind of redemption that only comes after the dark.